All right. Hello and good evening, everyone. Welcome to the fifth session in our Winter 2021 Thrive series. Tonight, we will be hearing from the folks over at the Earl E. Bakken Center for Spirituality and Healing from the University of Minnesota. So I want us to be able to get started here quickly. It's just 6 o'clock on the dot. So tonight I'm going to turn it over to Megan and Marianne, as I mentioned, from the Center for Spirituality and Healing. So I'm really excited to hear all of the wonderful things that they have to say as we cover an introduction to mindfulness and mindful movement. So with that, Marianne and Megan, I will let you take it away.
Well, thank you so much for having us. It's a pleasure to be here. I'll just say a few quick words about kind of who I am and setting the stage, and then you'll primarily be hearing from Marianne for the majority of the presentation. But I am here this evening because I want to share a resource with you at the end. So I'm Megan Voss. I work in the Masonic Children's Hospital in the blood and marrow transplant program there. So working with kids and young adults up to age 26 who have had transplants, primarily for cancers, but also for other rare diseases. And as part of my work there, we started to notice that people in their survivorship phase were looking for more resources, looking for the continuum of care and follow-up. So much like this Thrive series, we have worked to kind of gather and create a space to hold resources around topics like mindfulness and other well-being topics that apply specifically to people living with and beyond cancer and other rare diseases. So at the end of the presentation, I will pop back on and share with you some of the resources that we have created, focusing on things like anxiety related to scans and fear and difficult conversations, and a lot of the topics that can really impact well-being within the survivorship realm. So I'll pull up the website, share with you some of the resources that are on it, and I'll be available for questions if anyone has them. And feel free to start putting your questions in the chat if there's something specific that you're wondering about and you don't want to forget it. And we'll make sure to address it at the end. So thank you everyone for joining us. And with that, I will hand it over to Marianne for her wonderful presentation on mindfulness.
Thank you, Megan. So I'm really looking forward to Megan coming on at the end and showing you this absolutely terrific resource, this website that she'll share with you, and all the resources. And again, Megan, you'll be available for Q&A afterwards too at the close. So again, my name is Marianne Johnson. I'm really pleased to be here with all of you this evening. I'm a mindfulness and well-being instructor and lead the community-based mindfulness programming for the center. And I'm here today to talk about mindfulness, what it is and what it isn't, some of the science behind it, and we'll also practice some. Mindfulness can be brought into every activity throughout our day, but today we'll practice it with some intentional mindful movement. I'm going to do some chair yoga with you. And then at the close of that, we'll practice just a little bit of guided meditation as well. So I really wanted you to sample it, not just talk about it. So mindfulness, what is it? There's so many, let's just put it this way. It's a very rich topic that I think it's rather ubiquitous these days. We see it on the cover of magazines and many celebrities talk about it. But I'm just curious from your perspective, when you even hear that word, what comes to mind for you? And if you wouldn't mind, maybe just go into chat and just write in a word or a phrase. When you hear the word mindfulness, is there an image that comes to mind, a word or a phrase that comes to mind? What comes to mind for you? Paying attention, being quiet in the moment, conscious and peace. Noticing, I love that. Focus, noticing without judgment. Yeah, you guys are probably following along as well in chat. The breath, yes, we oftentimes use the breath. So these are all terrific concepts, and I'm going to be discussing all of them. Someone just added finding your center, attention in this moment. These are all just terrific, and they really weave in quite nicely to some things I want to say. One of the things I want to pull out is somebody used the term noticing. And yes, so much of mindfulness is just somebody else used the word conscious. So it's just a present moment noticing of what's here. Distraction and being preoccupied can be such a norm in our lives that can be really helpful to just bring our attention to right here and right now. So I wanted to describe for you the definition for mindfulness that we like to use here at the center. And I will say that mindfulness is over 2,500 years old as a contemplative tool and practice, comes to us from Buddhist traditions. And actually, if you look at most of the world's religions, you will find a contemplative practice very similar to mindfulness as part of many religious traditions. However, the way that we teach mindfulness here at the Center for Spirituality and Healing is as a secular approach. And we actually began teaching it using the approach that was created by Jon Kabat-Zinn called mindfulness-based stress reduction. This definition you see here is influenced by Jon Kabat-Zinn and also Diana Winston, who heads a mindfulness center at UCLA. So here it is. And you'll notice lots of similarities to some of the things that you folks talked about. Mindfulness is an awareness of one's present moment experience. Well, that sounds pretty simple. Aren't most of us that way? However, I'll say it's, if you really stop to think about it, and there's much research on this as well, that tells us that over 50% of the time, we're not right here, right now. Our attention and our minds tend to be wandering, and they usually lean in to one direction or the other, either pre-living, leaning into the future, a reality that hasn't even come into being, or ruminating or thinking about the past, something that's long gone. Now, there's nothing wrong with having good plans in place and learning from the past. But it's also really important that we learn how to train our attention, our minds, our bodies, our hearts to be right here, right now, so that we can be all hands on deck or fully engaged with those we care about and also with being present to ourselves. So that's the present moment experience part of it. And then we cultivate attitudes with mindfulness as well, including an openness and a curiosity about what's here right now, with a sense of kindness. Jon Kabat-Zinn's definition traditionally uses this term of bringing a non-judgmental attitude to this quality of awareness. I'm going to get to that non-judgmental attitude here in just a moment, but I really want to reinforce to you now that mindfulness is nothing new. You all know what a state of mindfulness feels like. You've all experienced it because mindfulness is an innate capacity that we all have. But because of the distractibility of these minds of ours, stress and how busy our lives can be, we oftentimes forget to be mindful, and we need to be reminded. And another way of looking at this is if we want to get strong muscles, we go work out at the gym, or we decide to go outside and go for a walk, especially on a beautiful day like today, at least here in Minnesota. And we can also train our minds much the same way through practice. And the practice of mindfulness meditation and some of the other techniques that I'm going to be sharing with you today, mindful movement included, are ways for you to train the mind to be more here and now. And now back to that non-judgmental awareness and attitude. Neuroscientists tell us that these brains of ours have a negativity bias. In other words, they're constantly scanning the environment for what might be missing, what's wrong, what's not present. And again, when you really think about that, well, that's a survival instinct. A primary function of this brain of ours is to help keep us alive. So that negativity bias serves a survival function. You wouldn't be listening today and I wouldn't be speaking had our ancestors not been hardwired that way. So although it may be a gift to us, there's so much other capacity of this beautiful brain of ours to also see the good in our lives. And one of the things that mindfulness can help us do is to work with that inner critic that many of us have that may be fueled by that negativity bias and the everyday stressors in our lives. So, when we talk about mindfulness, there's also another dimension to it. It's not just about this introspective tool. Mindfulness is also very other oriented. When we begin to become more self aware, we also become other oriented. It involves a social and environmental awareness. When we're able to be all hands on deck, if you will, we show up more fully and authentically to others. We're often able to respond to others with greater sensitivity and understanding. Relational research in mindfulness tells us that there's an increase in empathy, understanding of others, as well as compassion. You see a lovely little definition there by Jon Kabat-Zinn relating mindfulness to heartfulness as well. So this is a favorite quote of mine by not Jon Kabat-Zinn, excuse me. It's actually a Viktor Frankl quote, who wrote a book called Man's Search for Meaning. He's a psychiatrist who survived Nazi concentration camps as a relatively young man. And this is a shorter adaptation of his, but freedom is the ability to pause between stimulus and response, and in the pause to choose. I like to think of mindfulness as giving us a pause in the moment through our days, through that training of our mind, if you will, so that we have more opportunities to be less reactive, less on an autopilot that we so often can get caught up in, and respond more fully and authentically to our lives. So, question I have for you is this definition of mindfulness, is oftentimes translated as be here now. What makes it so challenging, and what gets in the way of our being mindful awareness? So if you wouldn't mind, maybe going into chat and just sharing a word or a phrase here as well. What gets in the way? Multitasking. Yep, I know that one. Just talking to a colleague about that today. Monkey mind, yeah, long to-do list, busy mind, worry, responsibilities, worry and fear, and we all have that. And different times through our lives, those can be stronger. One of the things I want to say right now, stress. Yeah, somebody just said stress. So you can continue to add living in the future instead of the here and now. Yeah, these are all terrific. And one of the things I want to say is that right now, many of us are experiencing more stress and anxiety than we normally might because of the pandemic. This has been a really rough year and a half for many of us. Also, the death of George Floyd, the presidential election, all of that has added increased levels of stress and anxiety in many of our lives. So everyday stressors are there, but I think it's even perhaps more so, and many of you may have been experiencing that. The psychiatrists and psychologists will sometimes call that unusual adjustment reactions. So you may have noticed yourself a little bit more reactive. So maybe there's even more of a place for mindfulness in our lives right now. So yeah, somebody wrote in stress there, I saw in the chat. You bet. Stress, somebody else I just saw wrote in life. Yes, and an inevitable part of being human in our everyday lives is stress. And mindfulness isn't a magic wand. It won't take that away. But maybe what mindfulness can do is something even more powerful. At least I found that in my over 25 years of mindfulness practice and teaching it for over 10 years now. And that's that mindfulness allows us to be with the inevitable stressors and challenges and difficulties in our lives from a different perspective, to maybe be less reactive and maybe more compassionate to ourselves, kinder to ourselves than we might not otherwise. So somebody mentioned this, multitasking, right? There's a whole lot of things that we have some control over that add stress to our lives. And some of that is the quality of attention that we give to our lives. I have a colleague who says most of us are in a chronic state of partial attention or chronic partial just lack of intentionality, right? So we live in this hyper complex 24/7 connected world in an unprecedented rate of change. And then add into that the things I just said about the last year and a half for us. So we can understand why we have busy minds that may be a little distracted right now. And then there's also our use of technology and social media. I like to say that I love my iPhone and I like social media just like everybody else. And it's not the technology or the social media per se, it's mainly us users and how we choose to use that. One of the tips that we talk about when we're talking about well being and mindfulness at the center these days is rationing, if you will. Maybe just once or twice a day, mindfully listening to the news rather than constantly paying attention to it throughout the day, which can lead to distractibility and irritation and anxiety oftentimes in our minds. And again, you see some stats there that are a little surprising. I learned some of those at a conference I was at recently, and it was startling to me. So yeah, on average, Americans check their cell phones 96 times a day. I saw another one from T-Mobile that said up to 150 times a day. And think about that. Every time you pull away from that, there's, let's say that you were writing something or taking care of bills or something like that, and suddenly you went to check an email or a text message on your cell phone, and every time you come back, that's kind of multitasking, and there's a drop in our overall productivity and completion time and errors. So mindfulness maybe can serve as a helpful reminder as to what are we paying attention to and the quality of our attention, and giving us some of those choice points that we saw in that Viktor Frankl quote. So we know from the research at mindfulness at the center, and actually throughout the world now, we've got over 35 years of rather substantial research now on the impacts of mindfulness on our physical, mental, and emotional well-being. And we know that the neuroplasticity of our brain allows us, through this regular practice of mindfulness, to have positive impacts on our attention, just talked about that, our ability to focus more on the present moment, memory, emotional regulation, emotional intelligence. And you'll see here a little diagram on that brain there. The amygdala, many of you know, is associated with stress, that fight or flee response. And when we are under stress, and the more activated we are, the more activated that amygdala becomes. When that happens, all the blood rushes to our vital systems, our muscular systems, so we can do that fight or flee or freeze. And when we do that, we're also short-circuiting that more executive functioning of that prefrontal cortex. And I know you've had a session already on stress, so just a reminder, some of you may have experienced that fuzzy brain or not being able to recall things as well. That can happen when we're under stress, when you've activated. That's the amygdala at work, if you will. With mindfulness, we notice that with some practice, and usually it's an 8-week course in mindfulness-based stress reduction, which we teach at the U, it's the pre and post test there, and using fMRI scans, we notice that there is reduced activity in the amygdala. And we're not talking about going away to a cave and meditating for hours at a day. Dosage here can be just 20 minutes a day or 10 minutes a day that we begin to see some of these results. Less activity in the activity of the amygdala, and increased activity in that prefrontal cortex, which allows us to make maybe better and stronger decisions and retrieve information and memory, and also some positive emotions, maybe more access to those as well. And when we look at the evidence around mindfulness, we see that there are primarily, I'm going to give you 3 central areas. The first is a reduction in anxiety and stress and depression. Now, no one should ever go off their meds while practicing mindfulness meditation or any of these mindful approaches I'm going to be talking about. We at the center really like to see mindfulness as a tool in addition to good medical care. So an integrative approach works really well. Pain, excuse me, some of the initial research done in mindfulness was done around the area of pain. And just as I said earlier, that mindfulness does not eliminate stress in our lives, it also cannot eliminate pain. But what it can do, particularly with physical pain, excuse me, but we also see this in emotional pain and discomfort as well, that mindfulness gives us an ability to step back a little bit and to notice some distance, if you will, between the sensation of pain itself and then our excuse me, our emotional interpretation of that pain. And we kind of know the add-ons that we can do. And when we do that, we get very reactive around our pain, which is also a very common phenomena. We can actually increase the sensation of pain itself. So it allows us, if you will, to soften in to some of those painful experiences. And then we also notice a third area that we have some evidence around mindfulness is with overall health and well-being. People report oftentimes better sleep, general coping mechanisms, and quality of life. So I think it's about time that we practice, but before we do that, I wanted to give you just a little tool here, a process model, if you will, for mindfulness meditation. Some of you listening today may already have a meditation practice. And if you do, I have a feeling that this model here will probably ring true for you. So the way that we generally teach mindfulness meditation is that we give you something to pay attention to keep that busy mind that we know that loves to wander and look for the novel or whatever it may be. We give it something to pay attention to. And oftentimes with mindfulness meditation, that object is something in the body, the breath, for example, or body sensations, the sense of the body as a whole, mindful movement, which I'm about to do with you in just a few minutes. And we do that because the body is always in the present moment. So what a terrific instrument to use. So in this example, let's use the breath. So let's say, and I'll do this with you a little bit later, let's follow the breath. And as you're following the breath, after a few minutes, your attention is likely to wander, particularly when you're new to meditation, but even after you've been meditating for years, it's very common. Primary function of our brain loves to wander and loves to think, right? So that's what it's going to do. When it does that, when you notice that your attention has wandered off to that to-do list, which someone was talking about in the chat earlier, and you wake up to that, you notice it, it loses focus. That's actually a very powerful act of mindfulness. Remember I said earlier that mindfulness is really about noticing. So when you notice that your attention has wandered away to that to-do list, or maybe something that happened earlier in the day, or regret about a conversation you had, whatever it may be, when you wake up to that, and then you see that and escort your attention back and regain your focus, that's what builds that muscle of mindfulness. So no worries about thoughts. I think there's a common misperception that mindfulness is about blissing out or never having any thoughts again, and not the case at all, at least no thoughts while you're meditating. The truth is here that when we notice that the mind, our attention has wandered, and we wake up to that, and if we can greet that with what John Kabat-Zinn said was a non-judgmental attitude, instead of that message of I'm the worst meditator in the world, or getting carried away into that to-do list, or ruminating about that conversation, but instead just maybe labeling that thinking. Everyone's mind thinks, and I just got lost in a thought. It's a normal process. And then with some kindness and care, just escort your attention back and begin fresh and new again. Again, a reminder that that's what builds that muscle of mindfulness. So that's what we're going to practice. I'm going to move my chair, and I'm also going to change my camera so that you can see me just a little bit better here. So, and I'm going to invite all of you. We're going to do some chair yoga now. So I'm going to invite all of you to join me in a chair. And you may wish to just temporarily take down the slide deck so that people can see me, or we can just leave this image like this, and I think you can all see my image, so you can do this as well. Either way. There we go. You can probably see me a little bit better this way. All right. So I'm just sitting in an everyday chair, which I hope you are as well. If you've got wheels, you'll notice I scooted my chair to the side that had wheels just so that I could be a little bit more stable. So I'm just going to guide you through some movements, and I'm going to invite you before we do this, if you've been sitting all day, to maybe stand up. And you can't see me if I'm going to stand up. You won't be able to see my head, but maybe just shake out your arms and do some shaking with the legs, just kind of as if you're shaking out the stressors of the day. That might feel good. So I'm just going to invite you to do that. And then when you're ready, taking a seat again. Doesn't that just even moving around a little bit help sometimes? All right. So I'm going to guide you through some chair yoga, and I chose this because this is something you can do anywhere at any time. Very accessible, very portable. So I'm going to start with what we call our seated mountain posture. Those of you who maybe do yoga practices may do this standing up. You could do some of these standing up if you wished. But you'll notice I'm starting with, I've just got on everyday shoes. You could do this barefoot if you wanted as well. My feet are about hip width distance apart, flat on the floor. And I'm choosing to sit on the edge of the chair here so that my spine is straight. There's a sense of uplift from the base of my spine all the way up as if there's a string coming out of the top of my head. And my feet are planted into the floor as if there's roots coming down. So there's a groundedness towards the earth and a sense of uplift in the upper part of the body as well. I'm going to roll up, back, and down my shoulders, and I'm going to invite you to do the same as a way to open up the chest. Doesn't it feel good? And one more little tip I'm going to give you. If you want to turn your thumbs, as I'm doing, towards the back of the room right now, you may notice a chest opening here. That's a unique. Yoga teachers often say, open the chest, but this lets you know what that feels like. And then keeping that open, maybe just bring the hands back down to the thigh. So now there's a real strength of the stability, the grace, and the groundedness, the strength of a mountain when we bring a conscious, mindful awareness to the body, simply sitting here right now. Our eyes aren't closed, and yet we're practicing focusing our attention here now. And now from this movement, I'll take us through this posture. We'll move in and out of this mountain pose. I'm going to invite you to lace your hands just as I've done here. And then I'm going to turn the palms towards the ceiling. Now, before we move into this, I just want to suggest to any of you, just be very, very careful. There may be a shoulder issue you have or a movement I'm doing that isn't appropriate for you. So please back off that particular one and simply sitting in your mountain posture, alert and aware, and doing some soft breathing can be just as significant. All right. But for those of you who would like to experiment with this, we're lacing hands, and then I'm just bringing the hands above, and I'm doing a nice stretch. So I'm bringing the palms towards the sky, and I'm allowing the stretch to actually come from the arm joint itself here. So not bringing the shoulders up to the ears, but just doing a real nice elongation. And then maybe if you'd like taking a breath in, and I'm just going to turn to one side now, doing a nice stretch from that. And if that feels too much to have your hands connected, maybe just releasing them. Maybe for you, the bend is just ever so slight. So just stretching those fingers if you want, if you've released them to the side. Soft belly breathing, and let's come back to center. And let's do the other side now. Just a nice simple stretch, extending the fingers long, feet grounded into the floor. Let's take a deep breath in and deep breath out. And one more deep breath in. And as you breathe out, slowly releasing the arms down to the sides. All right. Thank you for joining me on that. Maybe let's all just take a moment and bring our attention to the face. We oftentimes hold a great deal of tension and stress in the muscles in our face. So maybe we could just start by paying some mindful attention now to the temples and the corners of the eyes and just inviting, as best you can, a sense of ease. Letting go if there's a tightness or holding, or the cheeks or the corners of the mouth, the tongue, the jaw, the chin, the shoulders. And now let's move, inviting a sense of ease a little lower here in our shoulders. So this time to bring shoulders up towards the ears and then rolling in a circular motion back and down. So again, just adapting this or slowing it down a bit if that feels more appropriate for you. Trusting what your body needs. We're bringing that sense of kindness to the movements of the body. Caring for ourselves. And now let's reverse it in the opposite direction. So now, once again, I'm bringing the shoulders up towards the ears, but the circular motion this time is in the front. So now, rather than the shoulder blades coming together in the back, they're opening up space between, we're opening up space between the shoulder blades. Just enjoying these gentle movements and bringing your awareness into the body. We get to just put to rest that busy thinking mind of ours and enjoy the sensations and the movements, fluid body movements. And then coming back to center. Pausing for just a moment now. Closing your eyes if that would feel all right for you, maybe, and just paying attention, turning your gaze inward for a moment. And noticing what you're noticing in the body now after those few movements. Maybe some of you are noticing stiffness, but maybe an increased sense of energy or vitality, maybe a little faster heartbeat, or maybe some warmth. We're bringing mindful awareness to just the bare sensations of the body without having to tell a story around it, just observing. All right. Let's move on to our next. Let's do some neck rolls. And here you can just follow along with me. I'm going to do what I call half moon rolls. So I'm going to start with lowering my chin to the chest here and just letting that heavy head hang. Just letting it hang and releasing again, just as you did with the face, as best you can, holding tightness. Maybe noticing the muscles in the face and inviting again a sense of ease. And then when you're ready, we'll slowly roll the head to the right and to the left. Just half moon, back and forth. Being very gentle. If there's an area of your neck that suggests you don't do this full rotation, then easing back. And then when you're ready, just coming to one side now. And this time I'm going to intentionally bring my ear a little closer down to the shoulder. Just a nice stretch there. Maybe having a sense of elongating the side of the neck while you're also bringing that ear down to the shoulder. Caring for yourself and your needs here now. And then let's take a breath in. And as you breathe out, moving to the other side. And once there, once again, we'll bring that ear as best we can, what works for us, down to the shoulder, while also lengthening the side of the neck. I find it can help to let the arms just rest to the side, but for some of you, it may feel better to have your hands on your thighs, trusting your own needs. let's just do one more roll here, coming back to center and bringing the neck back up. All right. Let's do a couple of simple leg lifts here. Maybe just pausing for a moment to notice what's present for you. We slow things down with mindful movement. All right. So I'm going to keep my left foot on the floor, grounded, still in that mountain posture. And now I'm going to bring my right leg up. And I'll do this sideways so you can maybe see it a little bit better here. I'm bringing the thigh towards my chest. My hands are right below the knee, not on top of the knee, either right below it or behind the thigh might be a better approach for some of you as well. And just as best as you can, keeping that spine straight, just bringing the thigh towards the chest. It could be that for you, this is where you're at today. Others of you might be bringing the thigh in towards the chest, standing tall, and just feeling that nice stretch. And then if you'd like, maybe rotating the ankle in a circular motion as I'm doing now, and then maybe going in the opposite direction, and then pointing and flexing, point and flex. And maybe just taking a breath in, and as you bring out, bringing that thigh a little closer in. And now let's release that leg down. This is one of those movements where it can be really nice to bring mindful attention to the awareness of, what does that feel like? The leg that I've worked and the one that I haven't. And that's a way to really mindfully begin to pay attention to sensations in the body, noticing difference. So let's do equal opportunity now. And rotating that ankle in one direction and then the next. Taking a deep breath in. Tall, straight spine. And as you breathe out, bringing that thigh a bit closer in. And then allowing the leg and the foot to come in contact again with the floor. All right. So, thank you for joining me on those. I think what we'll do now is I'll move us into guided meditation. So I'm just going to move up a little bit closer here. So I hope you enjoyed some of those movements, and of course they're movements that you can do at any point throughout your day. All right, so I thought we'd just do just a few minutes here of a guided meditation, seeing another way of practicing. We can bring mindfulness to just about any activity. I'll go over some everyday tips with you after this as well. But let's just settle in now to what I like to call a comfortable, relaxed posture. I'm assuming most of you are sitting in a chair, so I'm going to guide accordingly. Once again, we're bringing that mountain posture that we started with in the mindful movements right here to the seated meditation. Both feet are on the floor, my spine is straight, and just place your hands wherever they most comfortably rest. I'm going to invite you to either keep your eyes open, or if it feels okay for you, you could also close them. We're just trying to quiet the busy visual field. And again, this will just be a few-minute meditation. So settling in now, turning that attention and gaze that's generally so externally oriented, of course, for most of us throughout our day. Turning that light, if you will, that lens inward now. And just experiencing, maybe noticing what the body feels like right now sitting here. Maybe noticing a different sensibility in the body, having done those mindful movements. Or maybe noticing the feel of the feet in contact with the floor, that grounded nature of the feet. Or maybe the feel of the body resting in the chair right now, the back of the thighs and the back as it rests against the back of the chair. The body is literally being held and supported by the chair right now by gravity. So just inviting a sense of ease in the body now as best you can, from the top of the head all the way down to the bottoms of the feet. Maybe we can all take in a collective couple of deeper, fuller in-breaths and out-breaths. And you're all muted, so maybe doing a really nice sigh with that out-breath. Really extending that out-breath, as if just letting go of all that's already been today, what's yet to come, and arriving right here, right now, as best you can. And now just letting go of the deeper, fuller in-breaths and out-breaths. And if you will, as if stepping back a little bit and just observing now the natural rhythmic quality of your body breathing. It's quite extraordinary that this body of ours knows just how to breathe. So there's no need to control it or manipulate it. With mindful awareness and a little bit of kindness and maybe curiosity too, we're just riding the waves of the breath. The in-breath from beginning to end and the out-breath from beginning to end. That natural rhythmic quality. And when you notice that your attention has wandered away from this object of the breath, remembering that that happens to all of us, there's no reason to judge yourself or get worried that you were captured by the content. Rather, simply noticing that your mind has wandered, maybe labeling it, oh, thinking, objectively, and then escorting your attention back to the breath, noticing if it's an in-breath or an out-breath, and beginning fresh, new again. Nothing's lost, you gained because you came home again. So sitting in stillness now, just for a bit. As if clouds, when they enter into your awareness, are nothing other than clouds passing through a clear expanse of sky. And just coming home to the breath again and again. Just this moment, just this breath. And now when you're ready, allowing this more focused attention you've had on the object of your breath to just recede into the background a bit. Of course, the breath is always here for you to come home to at any moment throughout your day, to refresh or to renew. But for now, coming back to the sense of the body sitting here and just noticing what's present for you now. Quality of the body, mind, and heart. And maybe offering yourself a sense of appreciation for carving out this time for good self-care, this exploration of mindfulness. And taking in a deep and final in-breath and out-breath. We'll bring this meditation exercise to a close now. So if your eyes have been closed, I'm going to invite you to open them. And maybe if you'd like, just do a little stretch or look around the room a bit. Just maybe noticing something unique about the environment that you're in. Thank you all for joining me on that exercise. Could I have the slides back up just for a couple more? Thank you so much. I just wanted you to know that there are many different ways of being mindful. We just did a formal practice of this mindfulness meditation, but we can also do informal, really powerful practices throughout our day that lead to those same qualities of states of mindfulness that also lead to then eventual traits of mindfulness, the neuroplasticity of the brain, some of those changes we can also develop with many moments, many times of mindful awareness throughout the day. Here are just some approaches. I worked with a colleague for many years who said she would tell these executives at this corporation she worked with, it's time for us to take a purposeful pause. And she'd invite everybody in these meetings, let's just be silent for a moment and collect ourselves. Let's take a breath, whatever. But we can do that throughout our day when we notice that we're caught in rumination or really distracted or in a multitasking event. Just pause for a moment, take a breath, and know that in that moment we can choose to respond rather than react. And here's a model, one of my favorites, that we oftentimes use at the center. It's another version of a purposeful pause, but the stop can sometimes help us. It stands for slowing down and just taking a deep breath in and out, engaging our parasympathetic nervous system, the opposite of that sympathetic nervous system that gets us in that stress mode, activates our amygdala. We can slow that down a little bit. My guess is that a number of you noticed in the mindful movement or the meditation an increased sense of ease. Maybe a little less stress for a moment, probably because you are activating your own parasympathetic nervous system, which is such a powerful gift of the practice of mindfulness. And then we observe with compassion rather than remember that self-critical thing that can pop in. And as best we can, we bring in some compassion. And oftentimes that just momentary pause or that stop can give us a renewed perspective, a freshness to our day. So here are some other things. Remember I said anything you do throughout the day can be used as a way to build that muscle of many moments, many times in an informal way. Walking, standing, or waiting. I just taught you a sitting posture, right? That mountain posture that you could just use periodically throughout your day. Any of those movements can be done at your chair. Practicing patience, self-care, and compassion. We oftentimes are impatient when we're waiting, or when we're walking someplace, we're in such a hurry that we're already at the meeting when we're not even noticing that there's birds singing or that there's someone you know that just walked by you in the hall. Not a lot of that happening with COVID these days, but nonetheless, I think you catch my drift. Prior to answering an email or a text or going into a Zoom meeting, eating mindfully, having a mindful cup of tea, really enjoying the warmth of the cup. speaking with somebody and really listening. Yeah, putting down the cell phone or not looking at text, really being present is a powerful way to enhance relationships through this mindful listening. Exercising, driving a car and really be driving, right? Reading a book to a child, waking up or falling to sleep. As a matter of fact, a great technique can be before you fall asleep at night, maybe taking 3 deep breaths and thinking of 3 things that you're grateful for that happened that day. That can be an intentional way of cultivating mindful awareness. So I think I'm done with my part of the presentation. I think I'm going to turn this over now to Megan so that she can share some additional resources with you.
Well, thank you, Marianne. That was wonderfully done and really nice to have those experientials together as a group. And I saw lots of great comments coming through in the chat that others enjoyed it as well. So I hate to take you into a much more cerebral space, but I think that is my job next after that lovely relaxation. As I stated in the beginning, I'm going to just screen share here and share with you the website that we have created, and hopefully I won't take you too far out of that lovely headspace that Marianne left us all in. So I'll just, quickly give a couple of minute recap around this kind of project and resource, and then we'll open it up for questions, and you can ask questions of both myself and Marianne. So as I stated, I work at the Children's Hospital. I'm also faculty at the center, and I work with a lot of young adults, and in my practice, I was hearing the need for resources. And, I work in the clinical setting, giving patients the kind of tools that Marianne talked about. We do mindfulness and mind-body techniques, and we use hands-on integrative therapies. And patients really benefit from them. And when they were discharging, they were saying there was kind of a loss in their lives from not having this connection anymore or having integrative resources. And so we created this kind of hub landing space of a website for resources that are well-being focused, but with an angle specific to what you go through as a cancer survivor. And so I'll just maybe briefly show you a few areas of the website and then open it up for questions, and we can look at more specific to what you're all interested in. So as I stated, we took a well-being approach and kind of broke well-being down into the physical and the mental. And then in each of these areas, put a very, a spin on it, very specific to all of you as people who have lived through cancer and other chronic diseases, the patients I work with. So you can see we have areas on things like physical activity. We have a lot of interviews with our experts that work at the University of Minnesota in their Masonic Cancer Center and Children's Hospital to make sure that everything we have is very safe and appropriate for anyone who's undergone treatment. We have areas that I think will really ring true to all of you, talking about anxiety through the lens of, being post-treatment. Things like scan anxiety the night or weeks leading up to having a scan and wondering about reoccurrence, the type of fear that you might live with. We talk about meaning and purpose throughout diagnosis and treatment, positivity. Transitions is an area that we're really still working to build up, because what we heard from a lot of folks was that it's hard to transition into getting a diagnosis, into treatment, out of treatment. All the different phases of transition are extremely challenging. And so we're working on toolkits and resources for that. One area I want to highlight in that section especially is conversation toolkits, because what we heard from patients and family members and family caregivers is that sometimes you just don't have the right words, and you just need someone else's words to help you explain to a friend or a family member what you're feeling. And so we have a collection of conversation toolkits. I should mention that this website is a living and breathing organism that we're growing every week. New content is coming up. I want to be brief so we have time for questions, but I'll show you that we have a robust set of information around things like mind-body practices, movement-based therapies, the whole variety of integrative therapies. And many of them are very interactive. They have diagrams, they have videos, they show you how to use some of these therapies at home. We are still working on building out the support section. I won't spend a lot of time on that given the time frame we have, but I do want to highlight we also have tools for the whole family and things that focus on the family caregiver, because we know that caregivers are an important part of the story and they need resources too. So with that, I think I will open it up for questions, and we can explore different areas of the website if you wanted to see something more closely, or you can ask very general questions of myself or Mary Ann.
I think we're taking the questions in chat. Is that correct?
Yes, please feel free to add a question into chat. You can also unmute yourself if that feels more comfortable for you. I know some folks are joining us from a phone, or maybe that's a bit more difficult. So feel free to unmute yourself and ask a question. Otherwise, we did also have a few questions that came in prior to tonight during the registration process. A few questions came in. So perhaps we'll start there. And the first question that we recorded was, how often should you practice meditation or yoga?
Yeah, thank you. That's a terrific question. I'll take that one. The first thing I love to do when I work with folks is to invite them to throw out the word should, because coulds and shoulds tend to get us in trouble. If you know what I mean by that, I'm sure some of you can relate to that. I think it's set an intention for you that's going to work. And so I invite people that have never done this before to try 5 minutes a day. Just try 5 minutes of sitting in stillness and quiet, and maybe just being with your breath. There are a number of apps on our website. We also have some meditations, guided meditations that you can listen to and refer to as well. But just make it something that's doable and approachable and workable for you. Start out small, work your way up. It can be helpful. The continuity of a practice is what builds that muscle of mindfulness. So if you can do it every day, that's terrific. Maybe your schedule is such that you can only do it every other day, or starting out, that's what'll work for you. And then maybe just building that practice over time. But I suggest you go easy and slow, work with your lifestyle and what's up for you in the moment, and set an intention that is around your needs.
Yes, that's wonderful. I see a question in the chat here. It says, you mentioned classes on mindfulness are available at the U. Are those available to us, and how do we find it?
Yeah, there's a website which I have a feeling that somebody who works for me probably sent you a series of resources. If not, we'll make sure that we send you links to our websites tomorrow so that you all have them. The center has a website where you can learn about all our resources and on all our programs. And we also have a website that Megan's very well aware of that's called Taking Charge, that has so many really good well-being and mindfulness resources. And also, I'll just mention that we do a free Monday course called, or not a course, it's a drop-in session actually, noon every Monday. I oftentimes lead that. It's mindful movement and meditation, open to the public. Although we are the University of Minnesota, at the center we have a real commitment to do community outreach. So lots of our programming is offered to people. Oh, look at that. You just put that right in there. Oh, I guess you didn't, but I will make sure that you get that website. I'll make sure you get that.
Yes, thanks, Marianne. And in fact, Molly over at the Center for Spirituality and Healing has sent a list. So we linked that list on our website. So that will come in the email in about 15 minutes after today's session.
I had a feeling that good old Molly would have done that, so I'm happy to hear that.
She sure did. Yes. So we'll make sure that everyone has that. I'm seeing another question in the chat. Is there a best time of day to practice? And I'm going to ask you, Marianne, to answer for both a meditation as well as a movement.
Yeah, and I would say the time that works best for you. Because unless you do that, it's probably not going to be habit forming. Some people like to practice mindfulness in the morning when things are quiet and still. Others like to do it at night as a way to enhance sleep. So again, fit it around your schedule. But it is the continuity. So if you find a specific time that works for you, maybe stick to that time. Experiment with what that's like for you. Experimentation can be a really good way to move into a practice to make sure that it's something that you can sustain over time.
Wonderful. And I see a question here, and I'm wondering, maybe Megan has a little insight. This one says, I've been cancer-free for about 10 years and still have issues of not being very aware of my own mindfulness. Is this common? And Megan, I look to you a little bit in your work with folks with cancer and other diseases.
Sure. Well, I appreciate the question. I think it's tempting to want to judge ourselves and where we fall on a trajectory or where we should be in our recovery. And the truth of the matter is, everyone has a different recovery period and a different even disease and treatment experience. And so I will say that it is normal that many of my patients are 10 years out and struggling, as much or in different ways, or sometimes more than they were when they were in treatment. So it's not uncommon for me to hear that. And it's a journey. And I'll say, what works for your mind and your body one day or 1 year or one snapshot in your treatment might not be working anymore. And so I encourage people to try a variety of mindfulness techniques. I think it's great that Marianne showed us something that's a little more movement focused versus something that's very guided, versus even just the option to start paying attention in your activities of daily living, because sometimes your capacity to tap in and sit still for 5 minutes just isn't there. Or sometimes you're in a hospital setting or a clinic setting, or there's people around and you need to do something that's a little more maybe active or less requiring of so much quiet space and time. And if mindfulness just isn't the thing for you, there are many other ways. I don't mean to jump in and overstep my job here, but I saw one of the next questions is someone asked, is prayer a form of mindfulness? And you can jump in here, Marianne, but I think, any way of quieting your own mind that works for you is wonderful. And prayer is absolutely a form of contemplative practice that quiets the mind. So it's all good all the time, whatever works for your body.
Mm-hmm.
Wonderful. Thank you both for that. One question I do see in the chat also is there an optimal time for aiding sleep?
Great question.
Do you want to take that one, Megan?
Well, I mean, okay, the obvious answer seems to say in the evening, right? But I actually think I would challenge you to listen to your own body and find out when it works for you, because number one, the most effective kind of mindfulness practice is the one that fits into your routine that you can stick to, whether it's for sleep or not for sleep. And number two, if there's something throughout your day that's a real struggle, maybe a coworker that's really challenging or just something that's really hard, maybe inserting mindfulness into that hard anxiety producing time of your day will actually clear your mind so that you sleep better at night, even if it's hours before bedtime. That would be my thought. But Marianne, did you have anything to add to that?
I think that's beautiful. I think that's an excellent response. I did mention earlier, sometimes some people find doing a brief body scan meditation before they go to bed, or some breathing or gratitude practice can aid in sleep too. But I love what you said, Megan. Mm-hmm. It's beautiful.
One of the things I encourage my patients after treatment, as they're getting reacquainted with their physical bodies and where they're holding tension and how to even begin a practice like this, is to think about just some light self-soothing touch. We know we get endorphins from other people touching us, but we actually get endorphins from touching ourselves too. It's a way of showing yourself compassion and kindness. And so I always encourage my patients to just try putting a hand on their heart or a hand on their stomach, somewhere that feels natural to you when you're laying in bed, or you can even do, arms across your chest. It will help you begin to sense attention and sense your breath and sync with your breath. And it's such a simple thing that we can all do. That's my favorite practice at bedtime and with my patients when someone's brand new into dabbling with this.
That's wonderful. What a great idea. I'm just going to do, we'll see if we have time for these last two questions. The first one is, do you recommend any specific YouTube videos or podcasts for meditation or stretching or other mindful movement?
Yeah, there are so many good apps out right now for meditation. Calm is a really good one that also has had some research behind it as well. Headspace is another really good app. I'm not endorsing any of these, but I'm just saying they're out there for you to sample and use. There's also a free one called Insight Timer. And Insight Timer also has movement, yoga movement, and a full variety of different mindfulness techniques. So those are just three off the top of my head. I'll also tell you that at the center on our mindful movement page, we have a number of free videos that you can access for mindful movement and meditation as well. And Molly sent those links, so you've got those as a resource as well.
Yes, wonderful. And again, we'll make sure that you have all of those resources in your email this evening. The last one that I see right here is, where can I do this in person once it's safe to do so?
Whoa, boy, aren't we all looking forward to that? Maybe we all celebrate that when it happens. I will tell you that there are so many meditation and yoga and mindful movement and qigong and all sorts of things like that in the Twin City. We are an incredibly rich community. Some of those resources, again, you can find on our website. But again, I think trusted sources, maybe checking with people. I'm not going to endorse any particular yoga studio right now because there's so many of them, and many of them are my friends. So I'll just say sample them. I think sampling is a really good idea. If you've heard about a couple that are good, go there, see if that fits for you, or a meditation center or something like that. Test it out. And if it doesn't work for you, the good news is in Minneapolis, St. Paul, and the state of Minnesota and surrounding areas, or wherever you live, there's probably centers for you to experiment with and try out.
That's fantastic.
Thank
you.
Can I add one thing to that?
Please do.
Gilda's Club, if you're looking for community specific to people who have been through cancer treatment, is a wonderful place to go and make community and do some of these things in person.
I just heard some pathways too.
I've heard that Gilda's Club has had a fabulous success story transitioning their content to virtual right now. So you can even tap into that in a virtual sense.
And Pathways too. Did you guys hear me say Pathways in Minneapolis has got doing a number of things online. I occasionally teach mindfulness there, and I know other people teach movement and things like that too.
It's another great resource.
Yes, thank you both so much. And I'll just throw into, if you plan to attend the survivorship conference on April 17th, both of those groups do plan to be there at this point. So that would be a great opportunity to engage with them if you aren't already. So with that, thank you so much, Megan and Marianne, for giving us your time tonight. I'm seeing so many lovely comments in the chat box, thanking you for the gift of tonight. I see so many lovely comments in there. So genuinely, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom with us.
Well, I thank your audience. This has been one of the most outstanding audiences that I have given a presentation to since COVID started. And that I've given a lot of Zoom presentations, and this audience has been very engaged. And I appreciate that because it makes our job so much easier.
I completely agree with what Megan's just said. Really a delight to be here with all of you tonight. So hopefully our paths will cross again.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much for joining us. So until next week, have a wonderful night,